Welcome, boils and ghouls and creatures of the night. This is a special episode of the Filmgasm Podcast. I'm Josh Allred.
And I'm Caleb Lachey.
And I am Ty Krebs.
Yeah, let's kick this shit. It's Filmgasm. All right, guys. Yes, here we are in a very interesting little setup. It's me and Caleb again, but we have also gone to the depths of the underworld to bring a friend of mine into this because I've mentioned him before as he's kind of like my pusher, man. He's thrown lots of movies and music at me over the years, and I probably wouldn't be the depraved individual I am without him. So I'm really happy to have Ty here with us, and Caleb, I guess.
Fuck yourself.
Two of my best fiends here. We're going to be talking about horror, metal, and we're also going to be talking about horror metal movies. Talking about bands, talking about the genre overall, like where it started, where its roots are at. And we're also going to talk about horror movies, obviously. And we're also going to talk about, as Ty likes to put it, where they come together and make disgusting babies. So, let's go ahead and get this started. So, Ty, can you give us a little history lesson right now on metal?
All right. So we kind of spoke about this the other day, but in my opinion, and anytime that you talk about heavy metal and horror movies, but especially heavy metal, there's always going to be that one person who's like, but actually, so the way I always kind of saw it is, you had bands like Blue Cheer that were kind of heavy, and Led Zeppelin came out a little bit before this, but really where the nuclear bomb of heavy metal went off was Black Sabbath. And that is absolutely horror. In a very heavy metal move, their first song off their first album is Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath on the album Black Sabbath. And that to me, that's where heavy metal was born. That is, like I said, the nuclear bomb that went off. Nobody sounded like that. Nobody was doing the demonic tritones. Nobody was seeped in the imagery and the language of horror and heavy metal like that. And for those who don't know the history of the band, which is like insanely well documented, they were kind of a heavy blues band. Tony Iommi loses a finger, gets a plastic prosthesis, has to detune his strings a little bit so he can play them. That makes the sound really heavy. Geezer Butler was into the occult, and they saw that people were lining up to see this movie Black Sabbath, and they were like, there's something to this horror thing. We're kind of hippies, but at the same time, we have this really grim outlook. And if y'all have ever seen like what Birmingham, England was like in the 60s and 70s, it was pretty industrial, pretty grim, pretty bleak. So they put that all together and come out with Black Sabbath. And it is drenched in horror, like I said. So, really, heavy metal at its roots, it's the horror. Um, and as you go through it, like, you had, especially in the 70s, you had like Alice Cooper, which some people might not consider that metal, but for the time, that was very heavy. That was definitely a lot heavier than like the Archies or something like that. And that too, that is all horror, and it just kind of launched from there.
Well,
So
I think like especially with Alice Cooper, like you start to get into like shock rock and things like that. And Alice Cooper has said
Yeah.
it many times that he was also a big fan of like the Grand Guignol and how that whole fucking theater troupe was solely devoted to like reenacting horrific moments from real life and having these elaborate stage shows where people quote unquote died and whatnot. And that got aped when Blood Sucking Freaks comes out. So I mean, like, and even that as its own kind of like subgenre, like continue to evolve over time. It's not something that a lot of bands do because it takes a lot of fucking work. And if you do it wrong, you look like an idiot. But if you're doing it well, you're fucking guar. So there's absolutely like an evolution you can chart through like those early days with Black Sabbath and like this really depressed, like busted ass working class town that just beat people up. I mean, to have your finger lopped off and still be able to play guitar, if you talk to some drunk asshole in a bar, like, yeah, that's metal as fuck, bro. And then they go on to become one of the best bands, period, but also the godfathers of metal. I mean, what happens from there to like where we find a lot of the heavy metal horror movies that we have in the late 70s and through the 80s? Like what bands were coming around then?
Well, I mean, like really, I don't know. That's kind of a weird situation because really in the 70s you didn't have a lot of heavy metal horror movies. It was still, I mean, like they were still kind of separate, and you had bands that were writing songs about horror movies, and like even you had like the Ramones did Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It wasn't until MTV, and to me that's always kind of funny because there was the like all the heavy metal horror movies you had of the 80s, they were all kind of based on like the glam metal scene. Like look at Trick or Treat.
Yeah.
It's metal, but it's it's the one of the guys from Motorhead, and the guy who went on to be in Flogging Molly, which is bizarre. But
Oh
yeah,
no.
it took
Oh no, we'll
more.
talk about that asshole.
I think he's kind of loosening up a little bit, but yeah, with that, oddly enough, it's MTV, it's the glam rock, it's everybody getting to see the imagery of heavy metal and going from that and going, that would make a good horror movie. Because like metal bands of the 70s, like Black Sabbath, you hear them, but then you see them and you're like, oh shit, it's just some hippies from England. Um, like they're not even wearing the inverted crosses. Uh, Another crucial step on that is, even though they never did horror music, is Kiss. Look at Gene Simmons. That guy comes out, he's got bat wings, he's breathing fire, he's spitting blood, and then he's, singing about being Dr. Love. But that imagery held for a lot of bands. And that's when you get into, you've got, especially in the early 80s, you had Venom. A little bit later, you had Bathory, all these kinds of bands where the jump is that you had like Motley Crue and especially Wasp are seeing this kind of stuff. They're Kiss fans and they come out looking like horror movie characters. They're pre-made horror movie villains. Then you have the filmmakers seeing that and going, all right, so this guy would make an awesome villain. And that's how you get, like Sammy Kerr. You get, it's kind of the imagery and everything starting to meld together at this point. If that
I
makes
think
sense.
Oh no, it totally does, because I think right around that time too, like in the real world, you had the rise of the PMRC, who were trying to take down all of these bands and other artists for their explicit content and things like that. And it's especially the case with Trick or Treat, because that movie absolutely like leaned whole hog into that whole argument. And like they had that scene where Sammy Kerr is testifying or whatever, and that's what Dee Snider did, and kind of showing them how hypocritical they were. and being able to kind of take real life, put it into a movie, but then also all of the bad things that they were afraid of, they're like, well, fuck it, let's just show them what that would look like. And you just get this wild, outrageous movie that to me is probably like the movie I think about when I think about this very small subgenre of horror. And I mean, I came up with a list, and there's almost certainly more, and probably some more on like a tangential level, but there's about like 30 movies I came up with that kind of fit this bill more or less. But Trick or Treat is absolutely right at the top. I mean,
I agree.
I mean, you and I especially, like, that movie means a lot because it was shot in Wilmington. So like we get to point and look and like, oh yeah, I know where that is. Yeah, I know where that is. Oh, they did that shit off the fucking Isabella Holmes Bridge. Like, wonderful. So
Well,
that's why it's like near and dear to my heart. But like you said, the music that is associated with that is very much like, quote unquote, what I like to call butt rock, basically. But it's like, it's a lot more dangerous because Sammy does like envision all of that. He's like the absolute worst nightmare for all of these uptight parents who were worried about, you know, their daughters getting taken away by rock stars. And like, I've always made this joke that like the guys in those bands with like Motley Crue, Poison, Warren, all that stuff, you know, like they wore eyeliner, they wore all these leather clothes and stuff. And it's like they looked like your sister, but they would totally kick your ass and take your girlfriend.
that is true. Um, Likewise, another big element, you're talking about the PMRC and all of that. That was, it's not necessarily the pinnacle, but it's kind of getting towards the summit of the Satanic Panic. And that, I mean, briefly, there's the book Michelle Remembers
Yeah.
that comes out, and then that sparks this whole wave of, there's a satanic coven in every town. They're doing nothing but like breeding and killing and eating babies everywhere.
Oh yeah.
And
Every daycare had a basement in there where all the kids were getting
yeah,
murdered.
I don't know if you've ever read Michelle Remembers, but
I haven't, but I've listened to some podcasts that used it as like source material, and
yeah.
it is some of the most insane horseshit I've ever read or
Well,
heard, rather.
well, like a big part of it is like she's like, between the ages of 13 to 15, I had like five babies or something. It's so physically ridiculous for any of these events to have occurred, but it's so dramatic and over the top that people saw it and they ate it up. And at the time, once again, it's, if we're talking about the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, I feel like that too was another factor where at this time, the heavy metal bands are being persecuted by all this, and horror movies are being persecuted for this, and they're kind of like, well, if they're gonna stick us in this on the same bus, then we should probably be friends.
Oh, totally, totally.
So I think that's another big factor. And then you've got, once again, like Trick or Treat. If you're gonna make a horror movie at that point in time, what are the two hot button issues? Heavy metal, horror movies. Let's stick them together. Let's put that chocolate in the peanut butter and see what happens. And yeah, so that's. And I realize we're talking a lot about Trick or Treat. I think that's something to get into. Is, you've got Trick or Treat. That one's great. The other one that really nails that like satanic panic vibe is The Gate. Uh, you got the normal kids, and then you've got the weirdo best friend that's got his bedroom covered with Iron Maiden posters. Which initially for me, that's why I loved that movie, because I totally identify with that kid. I was like, look at this little geek with glasses. His room's covered with Iron Maiden posters. That kid could be my best friend.
Oh yeah,
So
definitely. Yeah, and it's like it wasn't it like backward masking or whatever that like got the gate opened,
believe so.
yeah,
and young Steven Dorff fucking fighting claymation demons and like that movie. I shit you not. The first time I saw it, it literally scared the shit out of me. Like, because I mean, we as kids back then, like that was like cutting edge technology, you know, like I was still seeing like fucking Seven Voyages of Sinbad and fucking some other Ray Harryhausen stuff and like Phil Tippett doing the stop motion in RoboCop and all of that. So like that was the fucking shit to see in movies. And it was you didn't really have anything else to like judge it against, you know, like now you watch it and you're like, oh yeah, it is kind of hokey, but it's still an effective little romp. Like Caleb, like you've seen it, so like what do you think about The Gate? Oh no, you haven't.
I've not seen The Gate.
God, you suck. I was trying to tee you up for this.
I keep meaning to grab your copy to watch, and it slips my mind.
It's been sitting there for months, and you just slandered me and our friendship that way. I can't believe you.
Do you realize how many things are sitting here that I never get to?
I mean, that's your fault. You need to pause your YouTube list and watch a movie for fuck's sake.
Let's calm down.
That's a little inside baseball for you guys.
If you've never seen The Gate, I cannot recommend it enough. You're talking about the effects. The one that still to this day blows my mind and I think holds up insanely well is when the worker comes out of the wall, falls and hits the ground and turns into the little demon things.
Oh yeah, man.
That is a miracle of practical effects, stop motion animation, and incredible editing.
Oh yeah, like
that
you
thing's
can't
awesome.
you can't get those kinds of things if you don't have like real pros at the top of their game. And I think that's why that movie like still is one of my favorite my favorite when I talk about like, you know, gateway horror movies and stuff like that. Like it's just scary enough, but it doesn't go too far. And I think that's because you have kids as the protagonist. So it's like you're never going to see them like full body explode or anything like that, but it's still wonderful, and I plan to scar my children with it one day.
Yeah, it's great. Well, maybe this isn't the best suggestion, but I was gonna say it's a great movie for kids. That's at least when we were kids, that was a great movie for kids. But at the same time, like when I was a kid in the 80s, at least where I grew up, like if you were 8-9 years old and you didn't have a Kiss Army patch on your jacket, you got the shit beat out of you. They're like, oh, you're listening to Madonna. What is that? Get some Judas Priest in there.
For real, there's nothing wrong with being hell bent for leather.
Having stained class. So yeah, that's I don't know.
All right. Well, okay, so I want to bring this one up because I think it's like probably one of the best examples of something that's been like in more recent times, and Caleb can actually talk about it because he's seen it, thankfully, so you can just stop sitting here.
How dare you? Go on.
Deathgasm.
Yeah, I donated to the Kickstarter for the second one.
The first time I saw that, it was so much fun. Like it didn't take itself seriously. It knew what it was doing, and it could make fun of itself, and it had great gore, a real simple premise, and again it was touching on these like taboo things even to this day, which is still a joke to me, about like demonic forces being associated with metal, and these kids being so eager to play the darkest shit that they could get their hands on, and it just goes spectacularly wrong. Plus, watching a kid beat his aunt and uncle up with a fucking giant black dildo is still one of the best things I've seen in a movie. So Caleb, talk about it.
Oh, what a tee up. No, yeah, I do actually really like Deathgasm. I think for me, like, I was born in 92, so like a lot of the metal stuff they talk on, especially like the bands, both classic and a little bit more modern for that film. I was getting excited. I was like, oh hey, there's getting excited seeing all the posters of like early Trivium albums or Priest and stuff like that. but also it like I think you made a good comment with talking about like stuff that is still taboo because I grew up with my mom being very very Catholic, and I remember getting into having to hear it. Oh, it's just phase when I was getting into metal, and the fight I had to have, and mind you, this was pre the stuff going on with Manson now. But when I had to be like, just let me buy a Marilyn Manson CD. Let me get his greatest hits CD. And that was like that was the one thing that was like, no, he's satanic. And I'm like, no, he's not. And while our parents were halfway wrong about Manson, um, at least we know he's not satanic that we know of. Either way, the fact that I think by the time that was in the 2000s when I had that like argument with my parents, luckily my dad kind of pulled through on that one. Yeah, the fact that I think the film what came out in 2015 shows you that even well after the the satanic panic of the late 70s and 80s and all that stuff, like it still hasn't fully gone away. There's still a lot of this stuff attached to heavy metal, to horror films. I grew up in a small town in Texas, so I was the weird, quote unquote, the weird guy that wasn't listening really to a lot of rap or like country. I was blasting, Slipknot or Lamb of God or something when I, left school for the day or went to school in the morning.
All right, Ty, Deathgasm. Where do you stand?
Oh boy. I like it. I think for me the humorous aspects were done correctly. Uh, so I'm a little bit older, a lot bit older, ancient.
Yes,
I
we all know you're older than time itself.
so with that, I was a teenager in the 90s. Me and all my friends were super into, at the time we didn't properly know the name for it, so we called it evil death metal, but black metal when that was first coming out. And you had, it was technically the second run of Mayhem, but you had, Burzum, Emperor was a huge one for all of us. So we went through the first wave of all the bands that were coming out in corpse paint, and we're like, oh man, they look like Kiss, but they actually sound like Kiss should have. um and the other thing too is like they've got all the spikes and chains, so once again they were fulfilling the promise that Wasp was giving us when you saw Blackie come out with a giant saw blade for a dick piece. So we loved that stuff. You get a little bit older, and I mean, like, once again, as teenagers, you hear that and you're like, oh man, these guys live out in the forest and they're worshiping Satan and they live by candlelight only and they record only in a haunted castle basement. You get a little bit older and you get some perspective on that, and you're like, nah, these guys. Fenris from Darkthrone works for the Postal Service. He loves his cats. uh they're just normal people. So for me, Deathgasm was funny in that it poked fun at that to some degree. And my favorite scene, and it's been memed to death, is that is the one where he's like sitting on a bench talking to the blonde haired girl in corpse paint eating ice cream, right?
Yeah.
That is, yeah, okay. Yeah, that nailed it for me. It's gotten to the point where it is, and I hate using the word like meta or self-referential, but it gets what the metal scene actually is about. That, yeah, this is serious music and you can listen to it and you can be serious about it, but at the end of the day, like, you're going home, you're petting on your kitty cats, you're having discussions about what's for dinner, and that's true life. So that made me like Deathgasm a lot. um it did the thing. I praise that for the thing that Lords of Chaos did. Have you guys seen Lords of Chaos?
I haven't watched it, but I watched Until the Light Takes Us, and
Mm-hmm.
like really getting into like that whole story, and like once you like you said, like you kind of like peel back the mystique of like what they were on stage and find out that like they're just a bunch of Lord of the Rings nerds who wanted to make something that was so exclusively theirs that even the people who were in the larger umbrella of like metal and stuff, they were like, yeah, you just don't get this, we're just too dark for you, we're not even heavy metal, we're black metal, and it's just like you said, you get some perspective on it and you're like, they're just a bunch of dorks. Like, and I applaud them, like the whole DIY aspect of it, using whatever they could to record and get their stuff out. Like that's impressive in and of itself. But when you start to kind of like blur those lines between like what your music is and then full on like burning churches and murdering people, like, yeah, I think you might have a lot more problems than just not being the cool kid in the fucking school.
Oh no, I totally agree. With all of that said, I highly recommend Lords of Chaos. That one, to kind of back up the point on that, a lot of it's, I don't mean to categorize everybody, but it's a lot of the younger fans were the ones that were like, oh, I hated Lords of Chaos. It's because it shows them, they're in their black metal makeup and they're like out in the woods partying and blasting Accept, which I thought was great.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
They're It shows them like Euronymous hanging out with his little sister, and he dyes his hair black for the first time. And she's like, "You look stupid as shit." Um, but it shows them as goofy kids, and then like the scene where they meet Varg, and he goes up to him and points at his Scorpions patch, which is supposed to be a Motley Crue patch, but Motley Crue wouldn't give him the rights. Points at the Scorpions patch and is like, "You can't be with us because you listen to the Scorpions." It's yeah, show the goofy side, show that they're still assholes, but they're still goofy assholes, and that's what Deathgasm did for me in a very good manner, in a very humorous manner, and then still managed to throw in some supernatural craziness and have fun with it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing what can come about with the sequel. Did you ever see fucking Guns Akimbo?
No, I did not.
Okay, so same director, and I think it was a really good like second effort, and you can kind of tell that like at least from these few movies that I've seen, like he has a very almost Raimi like frenetic use of the camera, and it's kind of like its own little character in a way at times. And if he can, and it's going to be hard, if he can find a way to capture the mood and keep the humor in it, Deathgasm 2's got a shot for me. I mean, I'll watch it. Why not? I'm a slut for fucking horror movies anyway. So
Well, and that's the thing is like I'll give just about anything that's heavy metal and horror together a shot, even though like we were kind of discussing this, that the vast majority of them really are not good because they miss one side or the other. It either focuses on the metal or it focuses on the horror, and or it's done by somebody who's not really into either, and I don't know, it doesn't quite join up.
yeah, no, there's plenty of examples of where like, and especially with like when you're talking about the music, it's like, did you even do any research or like go to a record store and like ask the fucking guy behind the counter like, hey, what's good right now? What's good metal right now? It's always like the worst shit. And I think one that comes to mind, and we had just watched it recently, me and Caleb, was Hard Rock Zombies. And I like to call this in parentheses not so Hard Rock Zombies because it is some of the lamest fucking music I have ever heard. Like it's like, oh
Talking about Casey, whatever.
no, it's Cassie.
Cassie.
It's Cassie. This fucking guy like opining for this underage girl, and it's like clearly this dude is like in his 30s, and he's got a chub for an underage girl, which is just like holy fuck. I forgot because I hadn't seen it in so long. That was the case. And then from there, it just like shoehorns in the zombie aspect of it, and then it goes full fucking
Nazi.
rock zombie band versus Hitler. Like, what the fuck? Like,
So so for me, that one, like, okay, so right off the bat, Hard Rock Zombies, it is a pile of shit. But where it wins for me and where I will recommend that to people is kind of as like you know what they refer to as like a psychotronic movie, one of those ones where you're like, it is so weird, I can't believe this exists.
Yeah, absolutely, 100.
I
percent
mean, any movie that has Hitler and his wife's a werewolf, and there's the two midgets that want to watch him have sex. What the fuck is that? um, Not only that, so just like a little bit of history behind that. It's I can't remember if it's the producer or the director was from the Bollywood scene, and that's why there's all the dancing in that movie.
I
So
I think it's the director.
yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it is the director. But yeah, that's why there's all of the weird dancing from the band and yeah,
Like
I
that
don't know.
shot of
We're
them
like,
on the bridge, dancing on the bridge with traffic behind them. You're like, what the fuck is going on right now?
I think I think that he wanted to make a horror movie because that's what's going to sell. Like you can always bank on horror movies. Came over and was like, all right, so I come from this tradition of Bollywood where we have musicals. What's the music of the day? And especially in the 80s, that was heavy metal reigned supreme as far as if you want to get the kids in the seats. And that's how this comes together. And it's a whole bunch of crap that doesn't work, but somehow gels together to be this incredibly bizarre thing. I still have no idea why. Let's have Hitler and midgets, but yeah, that works on that level.
All right, Caleb, this was your first time seeing it. What was your reaction?
You can't predict what's going to happen next. Um,
See, he's speechless.
I, God, it's not a good movie. It's not good at all. But
But that's what makes it good.
Yeah.
Honestly, if someone's like, "Do you want to watch this?" Gonna be like, you know what? Put it on. Fuck it.
See, again, I've as long as I've been doing this podcast, like I've always, labeled a movie as a party movie. Hard Rock Zombies, total party movie. Like you have enough people in there and somebody's going to find something to latch onto and they're going to have that inevitable what the fuck am I watching moment. And it just keeps happening. Like it doesn't just happen once, doesn't happen twice. It happens like 14 times in this movie where it just keeps turning left and right. And you just, like you said, you can't predict where this movie is going to end from the beginning of it to the end. What happens? It's a total fucking fever dream of a movie.
By the time they establish that to kill these zombies or whatever, they have to fuck. They have to get them horned up. I'm like, all right, fuck it. This is what we're doing now. Let's go, movie.
Zombies are horny. You ever seen Return of the Living Dead 3?
Yeah, everybody knows that.
I think Hard Rock Zombies, it would be a great party movie if you have some friends coming over and then they're going to bring some friends that you don't like.
Yes.
Then you put on Hard Rock Zombies, and then when that's done, if they're still sitting there, you put on The Boxer's Omen.
Oh my god, yes. Fuck yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's a hell of a fucking double feature.
So yeah, there you go. That's the weeding out of the, like, we can still be friends, but I don't like your friends, so I'm gonna make them watch Boxer's Omen.
Yeah. And then they come up to you afterwards like, why'd you do that? Because I didn't like them.
Like, because they were dicks.
I wanted them to leave.
Oh my god. Yeah. So have you along those lines, and I'm just thinking of this because Vinegar Syndrome put it out as like a 2-pack. They did Hard Rock Zombies and Slaughterhouse Rock.
I've only seen the trailer and I haven't watched Slaughterhouse Rock yet, but I think you're gonna have to sell it to me because I just might watch it after we're done with this.
Well, I mean, you should watch it just because it's it's shitty 80s horror, but it's promoted as being like a heavy metal horror movie. It is not. The soundtrack's by Devo, which is the most unmetal band. I love Devo.
Oh yeah,
put that
I
big
fucking love
asterisk
Devo,
there.
dude.
Like,
Martin
I
Mothersbaugh is a
love
phenomenal
Devo.
film composer. Who would have thunk it?
Yeah. Well, it did the Rugrats theme. Great.
Yeah.
So Devo does the soundtrack, and the spirit in the movie that shows up that's supposed to be from this like old rock band thing is Tony Basil. So the oh Mickey, you're so fine. Yeah. Hot off of that, amazing earworm. She goes and does Slaughterhouse Rock.
That's a great way to sink your
It
career.
is not. Yeah, it is. Like I said, it's not a heavy metal movie at all, but it was promoted as that. It doesn't even really rock. And there's not a lot of slaughter. Uh, but it does have some really, really good special effects. There's some really cool transformations. So I highly recommend it. Just go in with the same energy as Hard Rock Zombies, and you won't be disappointed.
Okay, done deal. I'm sold. All right. Um, let's see. Let's find another one of these to talk about. Let's talk about another one that was a little more recent. Devil's Candy. First one that wants to talk about it. Go for it.
All right, just throw the ball out there. I saw this when I think it hit Netflix, Shutter. I forget which one. I know it hit one of the streamers, and I watched it because I think actually you told me about it, Josh, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll check this out. And yeah, I really like this idea of like really, again, kind of like really embracing this idea of like, let's just say, what if there is an actual like note that causes you to like get like quote unquote possessed. Kind of, I know they kind of go a little different routes with the film and do this stuff. I end up really liking it and had a good time with it, but I really it's been a few years since I've seen it, so I'm a little rusty.
Uh, for me, that one and The Devil's Candy, if I remember right, came out right around the same time.
Yes.
And the
As
two
Deathgasm,
get, yeah, no, okay, Devil's Candy and Dark Song. That's what I'm thinking of.
Oh yeah.
Those two, those two came out around the same time, and I remember one of them had an artist in it,
Devil's
and it
Candy.
was kind of neat. Okay, I'm trying to remember which one had the Sun soundtrack because I think I tuned out
I
of watching the movie and I was just paying attention to the Sun music
I
because
think that might have actually been Devil's Candy.
okay,
I think so.
I'm a huge fan of Sun, so I'm just
Yeah,
like
no,
going,
you got
okay,
me
okay,
into
cool,
them.
cool, cool. Okay, hit the drone.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah, no, there's a lot of that. And like the way that the guy is playing the guitar, because like he has no musical ability. He's just like droning the guitar to like keep these voices from compelling him to murder little kids. And it's
mhm.
yeah. It's gotta be Sun that does a lot of the soundtrack for that.
Along those lines, I don't mean to just steer the conversation elsewhere, but to me, the best heavy metal movie of the last, I don't know, like 20 years, Mandy. That is the most metal movie I think I've ever seen.
Yeah,
You've got the soundtrack. It's Johan Johansson, I believe is his name,
yeah.
but it's very, very Sun-like. She's wearing a Black Sabbath shirt. His weapon is the X or the F from the Celtic Frost logo.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's what a heavy metal should be, or heavy metal movie should be, is just go balls out, make the visuals match the auditory, whatever you got in there. Um,
Well, yeah, and your
it's
villain has to be
gory as
a fan
shit.
of the fucking Carpenters too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So make him a shitty hippie folk singer, uh, cult aspects, grisly murder, Nicolas Cage freaking out in his undies, drinking vodka in the bathroom, and Cheddar Goblin, which is the
Well,
greatest mascot ever.
oh yeah. Like I still like the first time I watched it, I think it came out like right after I got back from my first deployment. And actually me and Caleb watched it together.
We synced up because I was at Aztec school at the time,
That's
so I was
right.
in San Diego.
Yeah.
And we like messaged when to start at the same time on Shutter because I remember we were texting each other throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, I was reduced watching it on my fucking computer screen in
Oh
a hotel
man.
room.
That movie, like it has that beautiful marriage of very haunting, like disturbing visuals and a very like sour, like depressing mood throughout the whole thing, but then it's like punctuated with these intense, chaotic moments, and it forces you to feel it. Like there are movies that are like unexperienced, but you're kind of still like there's that distinct line between where the movie is and where you are. Mandy like sucks you in. And I remember watching it for the first time, and I'm just like, that whole moment after Mandy's killed and he's on the couch and he's like fucking just out of his mind, and then the fucking cheddar goblin comes on, like I thought I was hallucinating. And so much so that I did pick up a couple of boxes of the cheddar goblin, so like they're on my shelf and shit. And I I think for me especially, because we're pretty close in age, Ty, that like you see these weird fucking commercials that were marketed specifically for kids, and some of it was just some of like the most revolting stuff ever. Like watching kids get puked on by a goblin puppet was like, it really gave me like this weird like, oh, I remember when I was a kid in commercials, we had commercials like this. They don't make them like they used to.
Well, we grew up in the age of garbage pail kids.
Mhm.
All of our toys were like, buy this toy because it has boogers and snot hanging out of it.
Yeah, and we all wanted My Pet Monster.
Oh yeah, all the mad scientists. There was a mad scientist toy. I don't know if you got into any of the line of the mad scientist toys when you were growing up. Uh, there was one called the Alien Autopsy,
Yes,
where
I
you
know
got
exactly what you're
this
talking about.
alien. Yep, I still have mine. And you opened it up and pulled all of his guts out, and it had like goo and oozy nastiness inside of it. And you'd wash it off and you put them all back together and you put them up on your shelf. So you're like, yeah, I've got the urge to dissect a weird alien monster again.
There you go. Like, and
That was,
if that's not fucking metal, I don't know what is.
We didn't have these problems
yeah.
in my childhood.
Well, yeah, no, because your childhood sucked.
Let's calm down. Let's
I'm
slow
just
down.
saying, look, if your toys couldn't kill you, you did not have a good childhood. That's all I'm gonna say.
I had Bionicles.
Well, I think
Let's not
that's
talk about
the After Effects.
Yeah, right. We turned out fine.
Yeah, yeah. I think that was
great
kind of
words.
the well, yeah, all the '90s toys, especially, they were like much tamer. I think that's kind of the after effects of the Satanic Panic. Like while we were in it in the '80s, you know, everything takes a little time to get going and to get put out on the shelves. So in the '80s, they were making that to appeal to the crowd, and then the Satanic Panic hits. Oprah does her thing, Geraldo does her thing. There's the moral panic. So by the '90s, you got everything that was kind of neon and plastic and boring as shit. And then we got Jankos. So
And hell was truly
there
unleashed.
we go. Yeah, yeah. The real Antichrist was fucking in sync.
Ugh, don't even get me started. All right. What? No, I will no. How dare you? I'm gonna kick you off this fucking episode. You keep talking like that.
Talking to the guy born in '92, so I was a kid when all this stuff was going on. That's a wee one.
The thing. Okay, so going back real quick to Devil's Candy, like part of it resonating with me was the relationship that Ethan Embry had with his daughter, and seeing kind of like the metal dad having a kid that like wanted to be exactly like him. And I really like latched onto that, and I was not expecting fucking Ethan Embry to give the performance that he does in that movie. And it's like it's really really good, especially in those moments where he gets like sucked in to, the obsession of painting, and then like what's happened or what is happening around him. It just like flows through him, and you get these really manic um scenes where he's just like furiously painting and he has no idea what he's painting, and it's just like it's really really good. And then like by the end of it, you get this incredible sequence with like, and I hate like slow motion fucking filmmaking. It pisses me off to no end. But that whole sequence when everything's coming down at the end and he's like taking the guitar and everything is on fire around him and shit. It's just like that whole fucking, it just hits. It just hits all the right notes for me. And I still like go back to it every now and again just to be like, oh, I'm glad I'm raising a little shit kicker of a daughter who can carry on the torch, so to speak. And that movie to me like came out of nowhere. So I was really impressed with it. And I mean, it's good to know that horror and metal didn't get killed by movies like fucking Monster Dog or fucking shit like that, or fucking what did I watch? Oh, I watched Lone Wolf. I told Ty I did him the favor of not watching that movie. Fucking don't watch that movie. Or do. I mean, again, if you want to piss, your date off or whatever, and you're ready to break things off, show them fucking Lone Wolf or Monster Dog. They will never talk to you again.
Well, yeah, Lone Wolf was one that I've never seen, but yeah, that it looks like complete and total dog shit.
Yeah, it doesn't work as a werewolf movie. It doesn't work as a fucking heavy metal horror movie, and it commits the fucking cardinal sin for me of any movie is to be boring. Like I fought my way through watching this fucking thing. Like I had to like force myself to like not turn it off. And like a lot of the actors, they're supposed to be high schoolers. They look like they're fucking 30. The metal in quotation marks in the fucking movie is, again, it's fucking glam rock, butt rock bullshit. And the guy's only tough because he fucking teases his hair and he wears fucking jean jackets.
Is it like one of those things like I'm metal and then you hear a Creed song playing?
More or less. It's like baby, baby, baby. Why won't you come home with me, baby? Like Ty made a joke about that when we were talking about this in the lead up to the episode. He was talking about Blackie Lawless and like how tough they looked, and fucking he's like, yeah, girl, I want to here's my zodiac sign. We should make out. Oh, girl.
Well, that's like, okay, so it's gonna sound like I'm bashing on a lot of this shit. I'm a huge Wasp fan.
Oh, I know you are. I am too. I fucking
Wasp.
love Wasp.
But that said, like they're one of their heaviest songs. Like you watch the video for Love Machine, it starts off with him like creeping around this globe, and he's like snarling and looks hideous. And then the first line is him giving his zodiac signs. Yeah, he's like, "Have you know me, the love machine? My Leo is rising. Venus made me king." Like, what the fuck is that? That's it, in the context. If you didn't see the band, you're like, "Oh, great, cool. You're into astrology. That's cool, dude." But then you see him, and you're like, "Man, what the fuck are you talking about?"
Yeah.
So, speaking of Wasp, just because I happened to walk into the other room, Dungeon Master. Does that count as a heavy metal horror movie? It's got Wasp in it.
You know what? We're making the rules. So yeah, fucking Dungeon Master. Yeah, totally. And I actually just thought about this as we were talking. Did you ever see Bliss?
Yes, I did.
The fucking playlist for that movie is fucking great, and it's really fucking yes. I have what is it? Do I have it on? I don't remember. I think I picked it up where they. Oh yeah, it's in the it's in that Arrow Video fucking box set. I got that.
Yeah.
It's in there. Yeah, that and like Evil Speaker like tied in my brain as like a permanent like double feature of just nerds and fucking mayhem.
Oh, Evil Speak is great. Let's use a computer to summon up Satan to kill the guy who killed your puppy dog.
Yeah. Don't fuck with Clint Howard.
Oh, no, I totally agree. That one's great.
It's not really a horror movie. It's more of like a road movie, but it's got some really good fucking gore, and it's about a metal band. Did you ever see Heavy Trip?
I have not seen Heavy Trip yet.
Okay.
That
So
is on the list.
yeah. They're gonna be making a sequel. So like, it's from Finland, I think, and it's just about these dudes trying to make a band, and they're all getting together, and their bass player is okay. So first off, their band's name is Impaled Rectum with a K, not a C, obviously, because K's are way more metal. Um,
Yep.
and he, every time somebody asks him what they play, this is his description of their style of music: symphonic, post-apocalyptic, reindeer grinding, Christ abusing, extreme war, pagan, Finno-Scandian metal.
Good
If
stuff.
that doesn't sound like the fucking guy with like 500 patches on his tiny denim vest, and he's telling you like this is what you need to listen to, but you're too scared to because you're not cool like me, I don't know what is.
That's like the guy that knows the difference between brutal technical death metal and technical brutal death metal. Like they can tell you the minute difference.
Yeah, there is a minute difference.
It's the
It's the
fucking
amount of
guy at the
breakdowns.
record store with his arms crossed looking at you, and you're fucking picking up like a Venom record. He's like, you think you know metal?
Right? You grab Cannibal Corpse. No, who hasn't heard them? What the hell, dude?
Amateurs.
Well, so that's another thing too with all of this is there's there is a gatekeeping element, but then there's also a huge like the vast majority of at least the metalheads I know that are super into this stuff, they're like, oh, if you like this band, here's 75 other bands that you're gonna like, and oh my god, did you listen to this? And I mean, like that can be just as annoying in its own right, but yeah, the gatekeepery assholes, you know, they gotta go.
So that's an interesting point to bring up, and I think it's where I'll interject and talk about the history of metal and horror. That it's kind of like a Talking Heads documentary, and it like basically is talking to musicians and their love of horror movies and stuff. But the parts that I really enjoyed about it are exactly what you're talking about, where like metal fans are at a show, but they're not wearing like the shirt of the band that they're going to see. They're wearing like fucking Freddy Krueger t-shirts and fucking Jason t-shirts and Evil Dead shirts and shit like that. And that for me, like when I started to get into metal and punk music and coming across people like you, Ty, was that whole vibe. It's like, okay, you like this, check this out, watch this movie. Here are 3 bands that sound like the bands in this movie, and like come back and we can talk more about it. And being at a show can be like a really good experience. Like for me, like I'm trying not to like jump out of my skin because I just have like social anxiety in those moments, but I've trained myself over the years to like just focus on the music and enjoy myself. But then like you have those moments where it's like you see somebody total stranger, but you can immediately identify from like the patches on their vest or the shirt that they're wearing that they're just like you, and you have common ground, and you can like talk about movies, you can talk about bands. And you don't get that in like the in the normal world, you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
And
Well,
I
that
think like
was
bringing all of that together is important, like when you're part of like a smaller like subset of people, to have that ability to identify one another, and you can like point at somebody from across the room and you're like, yeah, I like that guy style, or you're like, oh man, that chick's cute and she knows about fucking Evil Dead Trap. Oh my god, I gotta go talk to her.
oh man, I don't at the same time though, do you really want to go talk to a girl that's super into Evil Dead Trap?
Hey,
Um
look,
Run away.
life without risk is not worth living, my friend.
Let me tell you, I had on the dating apps on my one of the dating apps when I was swiping, some chick said if you can't sit through a Serbian film, swipe left. I swiped left. I was like, I've seen the film, I'm good. I don't need to watch it again.
I don't know anybody who's watched that more than once.
She was all about. She's like, if you can't keep watching this, I was like, I can't. You got me. Bye.
Yeah.
I, I talk this shit, and I'm sitting right next to my copy of the Evil Dead Trap, so I am guilty as well. Um, but no, like kind of going back to what you're saying is, if you think about it, horror movies and heavy metal are both forms of art that inspire. I hate to use the word fanaticism, but it is a form of fanaticism. Generally speaking, if okay, outside of Taylor Swift and that whole weird, bizarre, apocalyptic death cult that she inspires, if somebody's if somebody's into a band, let's just say Imagine Dragons, because that's the first shitty band I could think of. Because God, I hate them. Um, you don't see people into that style of music covering themselves in patches of similar bands or getting the tattoos or tailoring their entire wardrobe to be about that style. They don't have 50 million posters. I mean, like there might be like a poster or two, but people that are generally into just, rock or pop, outside of the boy band stuff and the like J-pop and K-pop and all that, it's generally just, yeah, I enjoy that and that's good background music. Same with people that are into normal mainstream movies. I'm not talking like, the Scorsese stuff or anything like the Criterion Channel would put out, because people will buy Citizen Kane original posters. But, if you're into the Fast and the Furious movies, you're not getting a rock tattoo that says family or something like that. But generally speaking, like if you're into metal, you're doing that. You're if you're into horror, you're doing that. And I mean, like I can't say anything. I've got Misfits tattoos. I've got horror movie tattoos, and that's the vast majority of my friends. If they have tattoos, it's something related to horror or metal. You know.
Oh
Um,
yeah, 100%. It's one of those things, like you said, like for me, it's like an all or nothing kind of thing. Like I don't know many people who are like passive horror fans, because like for me, like I love damn near anything. I mean, I'll watch fucking SOVs, like a lot of the obscure stuff that gets just pulled from somebody's fucking attic and got restored. And I think I think finding those kinds of moments and those kinds of movies, and then you find somebody that also likes them, you find out that like, yeah, like they're just as obsessed. I mean, I like to describe my place that Caleb and I have when anybody asks like, oh, well, like, where do you live? Like, oh, I mean, we just live in an apartment, but it looks like Halloween threw up in here. And I mean, we just have horror shit all over the place. And I don't think I could have a home if I couldn't put up my posters from my movies. I mean, you've got the same setup going on at your place, Ty. You
yeah.
know,
Yeah, but I'll
Well, and
say,
that's. Oh, go ahead.
I was, I know, like, kind of going with what you guys are saying, like, when I was getting into this stuff, for a while, I was, like I said, small town, so I was like the kid that was into this stuff a lot more than most people. But like I said, it's hard being able to find friends. And it's so funny when you have people that are like kind of normies, they come up to me because I got a full, tattoo horror sleeve, and all the time, oh, you must really like horror. Yeah, that's why I'm wearing a t-shirt and I got the tattoos. Why else would I spend like God knows how much I spend on this arm alone? Or the people that like love to point at like a character on my arm and be like, hey, they point at Jason Leatherface. I'm like, why did you just do that? So the guy, it's on the arm. Like, so it's yeah, you don't get it with other genres of music or movies. Like you don't Mick Garrett says on his podcast, you don't have Western conventions, you don't have comedy conventions. Like it's not a thing. You have horror conventions, you have, like I said, metal concerts where as soon as you see someone's patch or their tattoos or their shirt or whatever, it starts a conversation. It's how, me and Josh met when I went to the boat, and they were doing, they do all these things when you're in the Navy. When you first go to your command, they're like, okay, so what do you want to do with your career? When I mentioned films, every time someone's like, oh, you gotta go talk to Allred. He's like, he has a film degree also. They're like, all right, let's see how this goes. Because I mean, like, I've gone down this route, and it's usually some dude that just is sucking the dick of Scorsese and Tarantino. and then looks at me like, "Oh, you like horror films? How dare you?" I'm like, "Dealt with that enough in film school. I don't need to deal with that anymore."
Oh yeah, me and Ty were those guys in film school.
Yeah, I was.
Well,
And
I always joke about that, that like, I have a film degree and I can tell you all of the film theory and the theories of the carnivalesque and all of these things, but I'm totally going to apply it to Emmanuel and the Last of the Cannibals.
yeah,
Yeah. Like there was a guy that came in to our ship like later on, and we were on deployment, and I got labeled as being like the movie guy. So like anytime somebody came down and they were watching something, they would like walk by and it was like, "You put this on, didn't you?" I'm like, "Yep." Like I played Pink Flamingos. Your tax dollars at work, people. I played Pink Flamingos for a bunch of dudes in our berthing, and I had people like take one look and walk away. It was fucking wonderful. But this guy was like, he's like, "Oh, you like movies, huh? Oh, well, I like this and I like that, and I think your movies suck." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, do you know that I could tell you 14 different reasons why my movie is better than your movie? And I will literally just go through and list every reason why your taste in movies sucks." And he never wanted to get into a discussion with me because I was going to annihilate him. And that is some of my more prouder moments of like knowing all of this stuff that we learned in film school, but applying it to these movies that people on the surface would easily try and dismiss as less than, or poorly made. And I'm like, actually, if you really want to look at the facets of its construction and the time in which it came out, this is actually a pretty good movie, even if it is a Jaws ripoff. And like I fucking love that, because I always just loved putting people in their place when that they have no idea what the fuck they're talking about. That's the best one. That's the best for me.
yeah,
Well, at the same time, like especially people who are into genre film, they're a little bit more forgiving of the flaws of a movie, a little bit more accepting of the shortcomings. Prime example, you do not, kind of touch back what you were talking about, like romantic comedies. You do not see people going, "Oh man, this is a great shot on video romantic comedy. They only had $35 and they made it in their parents' basement." Nobody's talking about those kinds of movies. At the same time, like, I just bought a copy of The Abomination, and that movie was made for next to nothing. I think people paid them to make that movie. Um, and of course, the special effects are terrible. Look at Things. That is a prime example. That movie is horrible. I love it. It has no plot that resolves itself. Special effects are okay. The acting is abysmal, but we will still sit and watch it,
Totally. Like,
understanding its yeah, well, understanding its limits and understanding its intent and its entertainment value as a whole versus, like, does everything line up? Does he get the girl in the end? No, and it doesn't matter. It's more about the atmosphere and the feeling and the intent.
yeah, absolutely. And I think like to like talk more about like the heavy metal horror of it all, like a lot of those movies are still being discussed and still have some kind of reputation behind them, and you won't get that from other genre films. You just won't. It just doesn't happen that way. And I think that says more about the people who enjoy them than it does, and understanding their flaws, than it ever does about, you know, oh, it only got released on video and never went in theaters. Oh, it's got a Rotten Tomatoes score of 12%. Like, get get fucked, man. Like,
don't even get me started with the conversation I had at work today.
like when I first started to see like Rotten Tomatoes start to gain traction, I was like, what is this thing? And I looked at it and I was like, this is the dumbest shit I've ever heard. This is literally like writing on a bathroom wall for movies. And then somebody going while they're wiping their ass going like, nah, yeah, I'm probably not going to see that now. Or like, oh man, that sounds great. I'm going to go do that today. Like, but it's really, it's pointless. It's pointless. And at the same time, that word of mouth works for fucking punk and metal bands. It works for little shitty horror movies. Like people, like one of the things I've always loved, and I'm looking forward to like owning a place one day, is like having those kinds of conversations. That's why I wanted you to try and sell me on Slaughterhouse Rock. I was like, I just plop this on your counter. I want to know exactly what I'm getting myself into. And you hyped me up for it. So thank
Oh
you.
God, do not hold that against me.
No, dude,
Um,
look, I will never hold anything against you because we have been friends for a long time now. And even if and even if you were gonna, try and like recommend a shitty movie to me, usually your first words are, "It's a piece of shit, but I love it." And that's usually enough for me.
that is the selling point for so many movies. Is this is absolute garbage and it's amazing. Um, yeah, that is a compliment. It's
Oh,
wallow in the trash. Raccoons live there for a reason.
yep.
When to me, like as actually, because you kind of brought up like Rotten Tomatoes and like this particular overall mainstream movie season, if you will, and stuff. It to me, like what I like about these is like even if these films aren't good, like Hard Rock Zombies, it's not a good film, but goddamn, they tried. Like they put their heart into it. They tried to make something out of it compared to these like by the numbers. The studio gave them all the money they want. There was no real try. Just hey, get this done so we can hit the release date and make some money because of its its a name half the time when it's a franchise. And I that to me is why I will always take a piece of shit. Even SOV horror film, I don't care because at least I know, hey, they tried. So it may be bad, but I know that these people fucking tried. And yeah, the whole Ron to me, dear God. Because I was telling you about Josh earlier where at work, they like to mess with me. One of the guys likes to mess with me and be like, he tries to get under my skin and be like to mess with me like horror sucks, man, it's dead. And I'm like, you're trying to like mess with me. Don't get me started, dude. Don't even go. I was like, I can tell you how like post COVID, the horror genre in the theater has been like the main genre still making money while everything else has barely been breaking even or flopping. Don't even get me started on this.
Well, it's spectacle. Um, People want to go to the theater and they want to have spectacle, and especially post COVID, nobody wanted to go see some serious drama. Uh, but at the same time, like, yeah, let's go watch somebody, slash up some obnoxious ass kids. It's it's very cathartic. Uh, there's a particular trend in horror movies right now where it's somebody's dealing with their own trauma, and like to me, I'm kind of tired of the trope, but at the same time, like it's existing for somebody to get something out of. But that, I mean, like that is the core of horror, is it's release, it's a catharsis, and that tie it all back in. That ties it all back in with metal. That is the most cathartic music ever. I read an article recently that was talking about that, and they said on average, people who listen to metal tend to actually be happier in a lot of ways than people who are not listening to metal. It gets the rap as like, oh, it's very depressive and heavy metal fans kill themselves. That is complete and total bullshit. Um, when you see a whole bunch of people getting together, listening to metal, it is, I mean, the singer could be up on stage. Like you could go see Slayer and they're up there doing Angel of Death, which is, it's about Joseph Mengele. It is one of the grimmest things that has ever happened in human history. At the same time, it's if you ever watch a live show, the instant they launch into Angel of Death, the entire crowd's faces are like grinning ear to ear of like, here is our catharsis. Here's somebody who gets it. Holy shit. And that ties back into metal. Um, it's two peas in the pod.
Oh, for sure. Like I've been one of those grinning idiots in the pit at a Slayer show. It's absolutely a means of release and getting this pent up energy out of yourself that like otherwise, if you were a more unhinged and maladjusted person, you would probably take that out on your neighbors or your dog or something terrible like that. Did you ever see there was a study that got published where they were comparing the reading levels of pop music, some other genre, and metal lyrics, and they were saying that like basically like at the reading level, metal lyrics were at like a college level or close to it, and like everything else was like kindergarten or like elementary level education. And if that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what else would. And like that's another aspect of metal and horror that is really probably one of its strongest suits, is taking a terrible situation or a terrible concept, a terrible, historical event, and finding a safe way to explore it, discuss it, make fun of it, or allow you to, take your anger out on a horny zombie Hitler.
Well, okay, just to kind of piggyback off of that too, and tying it back into horror. Metal is probably one of the most literate genres of music. I was trying to rack my brain the other day thinking of like pop songs that are based off of books, historical events, etc. And you've got some of the like story songs of the 70s, like the night the lights went out in Georgia and stuff like that. But outside of Kate Bush's Wuthering Heights, there's not a lot that's based off of classic literature or stories. And then you jump into metal, and you've got like they're total dog shit now because of whatever. Don't want to get into political reasons, but like Iced Earth, their entire discography is based on classic literature. Nile is all ancient Egyptian culture for the most part. Iron Maiden did the Rime of the Ancient Mariner in song form. Uh, you get into like Metallica, who has the thing that should not be, which tying that into horror is H.P. Lovecraft. Same with Call of Cthulhu, but that's instrumental, so that doesn't really count. Uh, Anthrax did. It's almost a concept. Like there's a bunch of songs that aren't about it, but the main gist of it is, Among the Living is about the stand. They read a book. They're explaining the book to you. It's a lot of these are very, very well read individuals. Um, that said, I know a lot of people consider them to be the Britney Spears of black metal. If you go and you read Cradle of Filth lyrics, holy shit, is that like an insane level of gothic poetry? It's cheesy as hell, but each one of their songs is like 5 or 10 pages of gothic poetry set to music. And at the same time, if you've ever seen him live, the dude has to memorize all of that to do it live. So yeah, heavy metal, very, very literate. Granted, they're reading horror books, which is awesome, but there's definitely an intelligent thought going into a lot of that.
What I love about that is like people who like get it, like the fan stuff, they get it, right? And then the people who don't, it's usually what I've noticed at least a lot is that the ones who don't get that, they like to hide behind the same like negative criticism or whatever you want to consider it, but like they're not actually singing about these things, they're just screaming to a microphone. And I'm like, well, you do that then and see how well you do, and then come talk to me about it, or just look up the lyrics, and like you said, you'll see like what they're singing about, whether it be HP Lovecraft or these other stuff, that because they read a book and want to sing about it or something like that they're actually doing, but they smartly, so extreme to a lot of people, they're just like, I don't have time for that. But those who get it, like us, we're like, no, you just look up the lyrics and you'll see.
Oh yeah, totally.
Well,
All right. So I want to talk about two specific people when it comes to like metal and horror. One of them being everybody's favorite Canadian tuxedo wearing debate king Dee Snider and his movie Strangeland, which we talked about it on an episode of Filmgasm podcast a while ago,
On
and
the old format. I
yeah,
believe. Yeah.
and for me, like it had its moments, and to like take it from song form, and then make it into an actual film, like it's got its problems, you know. Like it was put together by a guy who didn't really have a lot of experience with writing a script, directing a movie, anything like that, and it has its merits. It was kind of one of those things that like came and went, and then it's languished on DVD for forever now. It was like an early predictor of kind of like what would be what would become like torture porn and shit like that. But it also had this interesting angle, unlike Lone Wolf, of exploring the early internet and what it was back then for like people like me and Ty to like, you know, make our daily visits to rotten.com and try to find the most foul shit we could and go like, hey dude, did you see this, you know,
Oh my
to have
god,
those
I miss
conversations at school.
rotten.com.
Huh.
Oh, I miss rotten.com so much.
To me, like Strangeland came out at that time when you had like that and like Fear.com, that like surge of like early like internet horror films that was coming out, and the dangers of the the early internet at the time.
I mean, dude, the Wild West is what I like to call it. Like, you thought you were chatting to a fellow 16-year-old girl who was so eager to meet you, but it was definitely a sweaty dude in his mom's basement, like just cranking it to your internet fucking sexy times.
Well, sometimes you just found out the hard way back when good old Omegle and Chat Relay came out, and it was like, well, now we just know what they're doing. There
You know
it
what?
is.
You know what? Chat roulette needs to come back. Really scare kids off the internet. That's what I'm talking about. Really show them some scary shit. Let's do that. Somebody do that. Some of you nerds out there, bring chat roulette back. Let's do that.
Let's
I,
fuck it, let's do it.
I vaguely remember, I'm going to misquote because I can't remember the full quote, but somebody back in the early days of the internet said something like, the internet is where all the hot women are fat dudes and all the children are FBI agents. And I mean, like
True.
that was the truth. It was a weird time, but we had rotten.com and we had the Style Project. So,
Man,
but
those
yeah,
good old days.
oh yeah.
So
I
you said you hadn't seen Strangeland since it came out. What do you remember about it, Ty?
Man, what I remember about Strangeland, because that came out, God, that was like 97, 98, something like that. Am I
98.
completely off? 98. Okay. So 98, I was graduating high school, and it was the era, God, without to like ramble on, the late 90s, that was the era of the beginning of, it wasn't necessarily the beginning, but it was the peak of having those super edgelord dudes who would get tons of facial piercings and wear big trench coats and never bathe. They lived to buy booze for underage kids and still clung on to like the greatest metal band ever was Merciful Fate and King Diamond. So I remember watching that movie and thinking like, shit, okay, this is okay. This is okay, but at the same time it was also the height of getting VHS tapes imported from Europe. So I watched it once and completely forgot about it because at that time, like I was getting hammered with like, here's all this weird shit from Germany, and there was Fox Industries, which I believe were out of Florida, that were sending mixtapes out to people, and that stuff was pretty crazy. So my memories of Strangeland are kind of, this is good, but we've got some crazier stuff right now. I remembered not disliking it, but just thinking it was very okay, and it was kind of weird to see Dee Snider without the drag queen makeup.
Yeah, he
So
can actually be even scarier.
yeah, and at the time too, like it was once again the '90s where every decade hates the previous decade stuff. So in the 90s, we're all like, man, fuck all that hair metal shit. Fuck all those pussy ass things. You know, we've graduated onto black metal and industrial metal and all of that. So this old dinosaur, which is coming back.
Yeah. Let's all pierce the bridge of our noses and get our nipples done, and then we'll get tribal tattoos, bro. We're gonna be so hard.
You dare just bring up 90s metal and not bring up the what was fucking new metal.
Jesus Christ. I still think new metal is one of the worst things to happen to human culture ever. God. Ugh. Well, and that too, like once again, to piggyback off of new metal, you had when new metal came out in the 90s, that was also about the shift in horror movies where I'm gonna get yelled at for this. You had the Scream movies, and to me, I equate Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, all of that is basically the filmic equivalent of Korn and Limp Bizkit and Disturbed and all of that.
I mean,
Like it comes out, it fills the need, it has the horror elements, just like new metal had the metal elements, but it's not to sound like a purist, but it loses what made the shit good in the first place.
you're not wrong. Like I used to skip school to do extra work just so I could look at film sets for like Dawson's Creek and fucking
Oh
One
yeah.
Tree Hill. I had a
I'm
class.
sure both of us are in like several episodes of
Oh,
those shows.
totally. I skipped a class that was in the auditorium at the business school at UNCW. You remember that?
Oh yeah.
So I skipped a class that was in there only to come back there and shoot scenes while I was getting paid. I was pissed, but I was also like, well, at least I'm getting paid to be here now. So that was really funny. But then yeah, you did have a lot of the the fucking WB, CW, whatever fucking kids being in all the horror movies and stuff. And like I I do like Scream. Like I think at the time when I saw it, I was like 13, I think, when it came out. It was the excitement of getting to see a Wes Craven movie. And I was a big fan of Nightmare on Elm Street and Hills Have Eyes and stuff like that. So like I really enjoyed it, and like it absolutely became a product of its time. And like it or hate it, like I think it did. I think it did good for the genre, but then it also simultaneously like became a victim of its own success, because you did have I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, fucking all these other fucking just shitty ass fucking teen slasher movies that I
Yep.
just I could never. And then I'm sorry, but once you put Creed on the soundtrack, your movie loses credit for me. I'm sorry.
What if?
God
Well,
damn it.
That's all the time when I'm talking about this kind of stuff. And I mean, it sounds like I'm being a big old asshole, and I kind of am about it, but I always equate the first Scream movie to the first Korn album, in that Korn came out in 94 and everybody rushed out and got it. Like, I was in a small town, so all the metalheads hung out with all the punk kids, hung out with all the hardcore kids, and we all bought the Korn album. You'll have tons of people older going, "Oh, I always hated Korn. I never listened to that shit." And I have to call bullshit on that, because that's like a quintuple platinum album. So somebody bought it.
Yeah.
But we all heard it. We all went like, "Wow, this is something completely new." And then as soon as you got through that first listen, you were like, "Okay, so it was something a little bit different, but god damn it, now everything's going to be exactly like this, isn't it?" And of course, the next year, like Sepultura did Roots, which is a Korn ripoff. Limp Bizkit comes out. Like you had that, and it's the same thing with Scream. Like Scream came out in '96, I think.
Yeah.
Um, I saw that in the theater.
So
Went to
did
go see that in the theater. Yeah, and you come out of the theater and you're like, you know what? That was interesting. They did a different take on the slasher formula, but I see this being the next thing that everybody copies. And sure as shit, the next year you had, Scream Clone 1, Scream Clone 2, Scary Movie. It it did that, and it brought something that I think we're still trying to recover, and it's been almost 30 years later. We're trying to recover from Scream, and it's kind of shitty. It's not necessarily Scream's fault, but you have to throw Scream in there because they're the ones who opened that Pandora's box.
I'm just gonna put my point of view in here as the
I mean, you have to.
as
'cause-
the one born in '92. So I won't lie, I get nostalgic for these like late '90s, 2000s stuff. So like I do see where like a lot of people come from, but for me, I'm definitely like kind of biased, and that like I was huge into Scream. I'll say it. It's on record. I was very much into new metal when I got into metal. Corn and Limp Bizkit and Slipknot, and Avenged Sevenfold were kind of like my gateway to get into other stuff. And but I always see what people mean because I'm like, okay, I get it, but I can't help but get nostalgic a little bit when I'm like, oh hey, Corn's playing a song, or the 2000s when they were big about playing like metal music during the end credits, like, hey, here's a Non-Point song after Freddy vs. Jason. How's that sound? And it's like, I
Well,
I get nostalgic a little bit.
well, not saying that one is cooler than the other, but the thing that I tell a lot of people that come in and they're like, they'll be a little bit younger than me, or a little bit younger than anybody else that's around, and they'll say something like, "Oh yeah, I know it's fucked up, but I've never seen The Evil Dead." Nobody was ever born cool. Anybody who ever acts that way is completely and totally full of shit. Like, even Josh and I, who grew up in the '80s, neither of us were born clutching a copy of Master of Puppets. Nobody came out of the womb with like corpse paint and a bullet belt. Nobody was born Lemmy except for Lemmy. So there is absolutely no shame in loving that stuff, especially from a nostalgic point of view.
Mm.
It's more, I don't know, like the frustration of, if you've already gone through all of this stuff and then you see some like a cultural event happen, and you're like, it's not, and it's not saying that anything is objectively bad, it's just saying it's not for me. But when it comes in and erases all of the stuff that you do like, that's when it becomes kind of a problem. So yeah, and not bashing on any of that shit, well, other than Limp Bizkit, because they fucking suck. But and that's total, it's what we refer to as rape rock. um but
and
yeah, I
not
mean,
in
like,
the cool mentors way.
One,
oh my fucking god, bringing up the mentors.
but
um
I will say
ugh.
I've been on the God damn. I will say
I counter your mentors with the dwarves.
I will say I'm kind of getting on like starting to slowly go on the other side of this, but I'm kind of like coming from more from y'all's perspective now with that, because I do remember again, because like I was for me, like I was a teenager, like for example when the Saw films were coming out, so I'm like I love those films because I was a teenager, I was big into torture porn stuff. I love that for that period of time, 2000s, we were just getting extreme shit put into theaters left and right, for a brief period of time at least. But then like when Paranormal Activity came out and started like taking away, and I was like, oh shit, this is taking over. Oh shit, people were like this. I kind of had the moment of like, this is good, but I don't want it to go to this. And then sure enough, we got the found footage craze, and then the supernatural craze we've been going through since The Conjuring took off. It's just a weird cycle of life where like you're on one end, you're like, well, I'm nostalgic for this, and then you eventually become like, oh god damn it, this new thing that I'm just not as into.
Well, and that's fine. I mean, like, there needs to be everything for everybody kind of thing, but it's more when it chokes out everything else. That's when it becomes a problem. and kind of going back to the '90s, that was a weird time because you pre-Scream, you had like Candyman, some of the Return of the Living Dead 3. You had a bunch of really Lord of Illusions. Holy shit. Lord of Illusions, In the Mouth of Madness. Those were great.
Yeah.
You were
Army of
getting
Darkness.
Army of Darkness. Granted, it was late '80s, but it was just coming over to the States in the '90s. You had Tetsuo the Iron Man, Tetsuo 2, Necromantic was coming over. There were options
Yeah,
until
and that's like having that conversation with like you always have that one friend who manages to find the weird shit, and they're the ones that are able to kind of like cut through the bullshit and show you something completely different. And that is like very typical of metal and horror fans, always being the guys like, dude, I just got this tape mailed from a dude who makes music in his basement in fucking Germany, and it's the most brutal shit I've ever heard. Like, well, what does he sing about? I don't know. I'm not fucking German, but it sounds cool as shit. And
well,
boom, there you go. Like that was like those fucking movies coming out of Germany and shit. Like it was just totally out of left field. Totally out of left field.
yeah, and it was great. And that thanks to the internet, that's kind of widespread now.
For
The
sure.
internet kind of killed the personal aspect of it,
Yep.
but at the same time, it has opened up so many avenues to be able to explore this. And once again, going back to what you were talking about with the like heavy metal and the horror doing that together. It used to be tape trading where you'd get VHS tapes from Germany. Uh, the story that gets told a lot amongst all of my friends is back in the day we were recording techno tapes and really shitty dance music that we would get in like clearance bins at like Turtles Music, which that tells you how long ago that was. And we would send it off to Norway, and they would send us Mayhem tapes and Burzum tapes, and send them off to South America. And we would get Sepultura tapes and whatnot. Same thing with the movies. We would send a X amount of money or send like a blank tape or a tape that had like some American slasher movie on it over to Germany, and they would send us back Necromantic or, oddly enough, movies like Darkness, the vampire version. That's how that ended up becoming popular. Like that got made in America. Nobody gave a shit. It goes over to Germany, blows up, and then Germany starts sending tapes of it back to the US. Um, so yeah, it's two areas where people are super, super passionate kind of coming together. And to go all the way back to what we were talking about, I just wish that they went together a little bit better in a lot of cases, and we got better metal movies. Um, which I mean, that kind of not to say transition, but that kind of brings what we were talking about earlier with the big one, the big elephant in the room, the big
Dude,
bearded
you were like
makeup.
right inside my brain. You were right inside my brain. I was about
Yeah,
to try and find a way to get there, and you did it. Go for it.
the cowboy hat wearing, motherfucking noise complaining asshole that I love, Rob fucking Zombie. Um, why is it that he cannot make a good goddamn movie? And
So
it it's fucking painful. At least, and I know like that just alienated like 60% of anybody who's into horror movies. They're like, oh, but Rob Zombie's a genius.
Not
And
I've seen online. A lot of people bitch
man,
about his
well,
writing.
it's weird. Like dealing with the horror community, it's a mixed bag. You never know what you're going to get when you're like, oh yeah, you like horror movies. Somebody's either just going to bust out with like Rob Zombie is the greatest. He can do no wrong, or God damn, what the fuck is wrong with Rob Zombie? And for me personally, I'm sitting there somewhere in the middle. Like I absolutely love White Zombie. They are one of my favorite bands. I think they have I mean, even going back to their weird 80s noise rock stuff, I think they have a damn near perfect discography. Los Exorcisto is a masterpiece. It's one of my all-time favorite records.
Mm-hmm.
Rob Zombie has great taste in horror movies. That was like I was 12 or 13 when Los Exorcisto came out, and the first time my friend Kevin played it for me, that first song, it gets to like there's some Russ Meyer clips and there's some porno clips. It hits that breakdown, and there's that sample from The Mummy where it goes, "Do you have to open graves to find girls to fall in love with?" And I was like, this guy loves the same shit I do. This is incredible. And then he goes off and does his solo stuff, and the solo stuff's not good. He does House of a Thousand Corpses, and it's like you can see the intent there, and it's kind of like how he does with the music. Like, here's little snippets of all these movies that I love, but it just doesn't gel together. It's like he needs somebody to reel him in. He knows what good movies are, what good culture is, and it's not just horror movies. Like, the guy throws in so many references to just 70s grindhouse trash, which is that is the trash bin that I will wallow in for eternity. Um, but he doesn't know why they're good. Like, he can pick up Sugar Hill and go, God, Sugar Hill is such a masterpiece of a movie, but he
Why?
doesn't know why.
I don't
Yeah,
know. I just like it. Okay. I
yeah,
mean, yeah, that's one thing you could say about it. But like, okay, so we'll we'll talk a little bit about Rob's movies, and I think we can find a way to button this all up. Watch this, people. We said it. We're gonna stick this landing. Um, so like we said but before we recorded, like for me, House of Thousand Corpses is like a long form White Zombie video, in that
yep,
you've got all of these references to other horror movies, like uh 50s and 70s movies that he was really into. Really really good placement of music. Getting to see it in a theater again was really great, because that moment where he does the long take with the crane over the, was it like Slim Pickens or some shit, whoever that fucking dude.
yeah,
um
yeah.
Warren Goggins character.
yeah, so like where he's doing that whole fucking thing, and like the music cuts out and he's just holding that shot forever and ever and ever and ever. That is still one of the most effective sequences in a movie I've I've seen. It's great. It really like pulls up the tension to where like you don't know when it's going to happen, but you know something fucked up is about to happen. And then after that, it just takes a complete nosedive into the fucking grind zone, and it just the movie just continues to assault your ass. Like, it's just relentless. And I appreciate that. I fucking appreciate it. Like, when I first saw it, I was blown away by it, and not expecting that from Rob Zombie. I mean, you say that out loud, and somebody's like, you look at Rob Zombie and you don't think he's going to make a movie like that? And I'm like, yeah, no, because how do you know? Like, your only reference point up to that time was the White Zombie videos and his early solo videos that he directed. Like, that was your only reference point for like, this guy may or may not know how to make an effective movie.
Well, so just to interject for a second, I think especially with him, it's that he might know too much. Um,
Yeah.
so when he's making these movies, he's looking at it and he's going, all right, well, for this scene, I'm going to reference Spider Baby, then I'm going to reference this, and then I'm going to reference that, and then I'm going to make a reference to this and that. Whereas all the movies that he's referencing, with a few exceptions, a lot of those were not made by horror directors, like quote unquote horror directors. The best example, like Spider Baby, which he constantly references. Uh, and I get it. I love that movie. I mean, that's the whole one of the big reasons he cast Sid Haig in it.
Mm-hmm.
That movie was made by Jack Hill. His other credits are like Foxy Brown and Coffee, and he was doing a lot of black exploitation. I mean, like, this was before he did all that, but Jack Hill was not a horror director. He just made a horror movie. Um, and that's the same with like a lot of the grindhouse directors. I mean, like even big name grindhouse directors like Ruggero Deodato. He's famous for Cannibal Holocaust, but he made more like Polizioteschi's and crime movies than he did anything else. Later in his career, he just he leaned into the cannibal thing, but most of these movies that he loves were made by people who were not super invested in the genre. They were just doing it because we know that horror will sell. And I think with Rob, he's coming in there with his whole brain full of monsters, and it's just it's vomiting out, and it doesn't quite gel.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, like his high point came really quick because The Devil's Rejects on its own is a good time. Like I think he did try and practice a little more restraint with like what he was trying to reference in that movie and how he was trying to, still have the explicitness that is kind of like a running theme with a lot of his movies. And it's definitely, well, if I'm doing my ranking, it's probably like House of Thousand Corpses and then Devil's Rejects. And that even is interchangeable with Lords of Salem, which I just think is just a bananas fucking weird, moody, probably his most artful movie, if I'm being honest. And that's like my top three. And he just, it's hard because like I want to root for him as like the kid who first saw Rob Zombie videos from Beavis and Butthead and seeing that kind of shit like on MTV and like kind of him just being like ubiquitous through my teen years and whatnot. Like I want everything that he makes to fucking be great. And it's hard sometimes because like it feels like he just doesn't I admire the attitude that he makes the movies that he wants and he doesn't care what people think about them. But again, like you're saying, like there are times where it feels like he does just know too much.
Well, The Devil's Rejects, the reason I think that one works is because it's not a horror movie. It's a 70s road trip movie.
Yep.
So he's doing the same thing like in the reverse of what I said Jack Hill did. So he's a horror movie guy making a road trip movie, and it has those elements in it. So yeah, there's the shootout, there's the murder, there's all this shit, but he's definitely looking at movies like Badlands or Easy Rider or something like that and going, I can make a cool 70s road trip movie that just happens to have these characters from this horror movie that I made. And I think that's why that one works. Like as much as I'm talking shit about Rob Zombie, I do really love The Devil's Rejects. I went and saw it in the theater like three or four times.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Caleb. Your turn.
Oh, thank you. No, I again, I tend, I'm kind of like with Ty, where I'm in the middle, but I do kind of lean a little bit more towards really liking Rob's stuff. I think it has probably a lot to do that when I think it sounds like with you two to an extent. When I was getting into metal and horror, and people would always ask me, "It's like, what are some of your top 5 metal bands?" Rob Zombie was always in there because as a kid, seeing this guy that was doing these heavy metal music, but with this horror imagery and the music videos, really just stuck stuck out to me. And yeah, I had heard the right zombie stuff. It's like, oh, this stuff's really good. I like his solo career quite a bit, admittedly myself. I'm with some hits and misses with the more recent albums. But I really got in that, and then I think I was in like maybe those Rejects came out in 2005.
Yes.
Yeah, I was maybe a teenager at that time at best. And it was one of those films that, like, I'm sure this happened with you guys too. And we always hear like in the schoolyard, "Oh, you won't believe a movie I watched. Oh, it was fucked up." That was Devil's Rejects to me. Like everyone talked about the motel scene. It was always like, "Oh, you won't believe what's in that movie. It's so fucked up." And so when I watched it, I was just blown away. but I was like, this is the same guy who gave me Hellbilly Deluxe. Like, what the fuck? And from there, I just kind of got hooked. I do think a lot of his more recent film. I do agree that yeah, I think he needs to get reined in sometimes. I don't. I think he's technical wise, a really good director. Technical wise, I do think
Oh, yeah.
sometimes someone needs to step in and with his writing and be like, dude, not every character needs to be white trash like this. It doesn't always work in everything you make. So I do sometimes think he needs to have someone rein him in on like his the writing, the dialogues. I think technically speaking, he's a fantastic director. Um, but I'm with you, and like I definitely, especially his later work, I don't. It doesn't ever really gel for me. Like Three from Hell was a fucking letdown for a number of reasons. 31 didn't really mesh with me. I like monsters, the monsters. I'll say it a bit more than most, but I'm not saying it's a good film at the same time. Um, just want to put that out there. Don't come at me.
Well, no, but that to me, the monsters totally strengthens, in my opinion, that argument of yeah, he watched the shit out of the monsters, and like me personally, I am a huge monsters fan,
Oh yeah.
and yeah, he watched every single episode. He pulled out stuff like Uncle Gilbert and all of this, but he doesn't understand why the monsters are good, and this is this is the old schoolyard argument of between like the Adams Family and the Munsters, and like me personally, I always liked the Munsters better because they were a group of monsters, code for weirdos, outcasts, what have you. If you want to get super political, it's the race thing, whatever the outsider is that society sees as abnormal, but they think they're completely normal.
Yep.
And that's like the Adams Family. And I love the Adams Family, but they were always like, somebody would come to the door and knock on it, and they would open up the door and they'd be like, "Do you want to enter our wonderland of weirdness? Aren't we kooky?" Whereas the Munsters, you went and knocked on their door and they opened it up, and there's the fire breathing dragon, and they're like, "Come on in and have a biscuit and some tea." And I don't think that he got that. Like, he didn't understand that the reason the Munsters were always great is that you could take those characters and put them and take all the monster makeup off, and it would just be a normal sitcom. The ultimate humor came from the fact that, like Herman Munster is the giant Frankenstein monster that's goofy and thinking that he's talking to space aliens on his walkie-talkie. So that's for me personally. That's why I didn't like the Munsters. I didn't even finish it. Like, I got up to the part where Herman was singing the joke songs. I was like, that's, you completely and totally missed the whole purpose of Herman Munster's character. He's somebody's loving grandpa kind of thing.
Yeah.
He's not a rock star.
I won't lie, it's definitely something in my collection, but that's because I'm a completionist and I can't help myself.
Oh yeah.
Hey,
But,
look, no shame. Like what you like, man.
Oh yeah,
Nobody's.
well,
I'm gonna bust your balls only because we're friends, and that's what I like to do. But like,
I know. Oh, but with that, I will concur with you, Josh. That for me, the 1-2 punch of House Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects, I do think in a way he kind of like he peaked a little bit early movie wise because like, and that's a whole story with like him doing the Halloween films and the Weinstein. It's a whole thing. But he had that 1-2 punch, and I do find Lords of Salem to be a very underrated film in his career because it was him trying to say like, okay, let me show you a different side from once. And I was sitting there going, because I remember watching the first time going, where's this Rob Zombie? We don't get this like ever except for this one singular time in this movie.
yeah, I've seen most of his movies in theaters when they did come out, and Lords of Salem was probably like the most engrossing experience I had with a Rob Zombie movie for sure. And say what you want, like his Halloween 2 is one of the more like art housey approaches to a fucking horror movie that you'll see. I mean, obviously nobody can top the art house extravaganza that is Extra. Nobody ever will. But the fact that you had a movie from where you're like so close to the mind of Michael Myers that like you kind of get what his motivation is, but it's never like explicitly stated that this is why he's doing the things he's doing. It's just kind of like it's kind of giving you an insight, which I found interesting. I don't know that it works for the movie as a whole. It's just an interesting take. And if you're gonna make a movie to piss off Harvey Weinstein so you don't have to make another movie with him, fucking go ahead and make fucking Halloween 2 the way Rob Zombie did. Like, go for it. Like, and that's I was just gonna say, and that's why I can respect him for making the movies that he wants to make, and he's not concerning himself with whether or not millions upon millions of people like it.
Halloween 2 always cracks me up because it devolves into a Fleetwood Mac video. Yeah, so the Halloween movies occupy a very weird spot for me because I am a insanely huge Halloween fan,
and
at
a
the same
Thorn
time,
scholar. I will say that. If you ever
oh
want
my
to know,
god,
if you ever want to know how Ty really feels, where the Halloween franchise really went off the rails and really fucked up, let him, just sit back and let Grandpa talk to you about the Thorn fucking mythology that he has in his brain. It's great. I
oh
love it.
god, that's like a 3 hour discussion. But with that said, I went in with an open mind to those, and right off the start, I would say that if like I do like the Platinum Dunes Texas Chainsaw remake, but I feel like if they had given Rob Zombie the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series to do a remake of, I think that would be great. I think that would have really put him into the sphere of like I'm trying to think of the best way to put this with the horror nerds that are a little bit more outside of the mainstream that don't like Rob Zombie stuff. I think if they gave him Texas Chainsaw and let him do something similar to like Texas 2 or 4 and make it this weird ass psychedelic bizarre shitty dialogue crazy filled white trash extravaganza like he turned Halloween into, it would have been fun. It would have been great. I probably would have loved it. But you gave him the most serious out of all the slashers, and it doesn't work. Um, I don't hate the Halloween movies that he did as much as the David Gordon Green ones, but I still don't think that they're great. Mainly for me, it boils down to like, okay, short story aside, when that Halloween came out, uh, I was working in a tattoo shop, and one of our clients gave us like tons of free passes, and he was friendly with us. So at noon the day that it came out, I went and saw it, and came back and was like, guys, it's not good. Then and everybody was like, "There's no way! It's Rob Zombie. He's doing Halloween. It's got to be great. You're full of shit." So one of them, this is back in the days of Pirate Bay. One of our friends got a bootleg of the director's cut that day and came screaming in and made us watch it in the shop for a second time. And I'm like, no, guys, all right, this is the second time I've seen it in like 4 hours. It still sucks. Then that night, the guy who gave me the passes was like, hey, all those free passes I gave you? Well, you got to earn them back by showing up in your Michael Myers outfit to do promotion it was the Carmack Theater.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
He's like, you got to, yep. He's like, you got to show up. You got to do the Michael Myers thing. You got to walk around. You got the full outfit. So I went and saw it a third time that day. I was like, God damn it. It's the third time I've seen this movie today. I get home and my roommate's like, guess what? I got a bootleg of it. We got to watch it. And I'm like, I've seen it 3 times today. My opinion has not changed. It still fucking sucks. But I had to sit through it a fourth time. So I watched that movie 4 times the day that it came out.
Jesus.
But for me, like, he turned Michael Myers into a white trash serial killer with a stripper mom. I'm like, that's the exact opposite of what makes Michael Myers cool. But it all boiled down to me. It not to sound like like white knight in this thing, but the fact that he had William Forsythe look his wife in the face and deliver the lines, I hope that those cripples down there purge their snork all over your flappy titties. Like, holy shit, dude. I'm in for everything. Like I'll watch gory movies, I'll watch mean ass movies, but you just wrote the lines in the script and had an actor say that to your wife. That's something else, buddy.
That's the mark of a true artiste.
Yeah. And I was
It's
like,
cra-
great.
I think it's crazy at that
Ah,
time because of Devil's Rejects, the high of that, everyone's like, Rob Zombie's doing Halloween. And the discourse has changed so much since then.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
love it or hate it. That movie was holding a record for being the most profitable movie on like Labor Day weekend for fucking years. Like it was still just sitting there. It's like it made a shit ton of money. Like say what you want.
Oh,
Like people paid money for that shit. Unlike Ty, he did not pay a dime for it and saw it for.
yeah.
But
If he's the real winner here.
I mean, I think we can all agree
Oh,
Ty was the real winner, or was he the just the tragic victim in this story?
oh my God. Well, I mean, like even for a week, like there was a week after that because like at the time it's pre-internet where you can't just go post on Facebook hot take saw Halloween it's crap, so you had to like individually tell everybody that you ran across. They'd be like, oh my God, have you seen Halloween yet? I'm like, yeah, I've seen it 4 times. Oh, it's great, right? No. Well, let's go see it again. I'm like, fuck no.
I will not go to this. No, you will not make me go see this again. No.
that that said, Halloween 2 rolled around and the same person was like, all right, you got free movie passes. Dress up in your Michael Myers outfit again. Come down to the theater. You got to see this. Shit. So I'm at the midnight showing of Halloween 2 and went in, and one of my friends was already drunk. And as soon as it started off with the Moody Blues Nights in White Satin, he just went, "Fuck this hippie shit," and got up and left.
Oh my God.
To a Fleetwood Mac video. So had he stuck around, he really would have gotten to see the hippie shit.
Yeah. You really would have. Shame on you. You did not fucking stay for the payoff.
You came for Moody Blues, and then you got Stevie Nicks and her horse dream.
Oh my God. All right. Well, I think I think we've managed to talk a lot, and I was not expecting us to be able to hit the notes that we did. Um, with that said, don't be afraid to pop on a fucking shitty horror movie if you got a house full of people and you want to get them to leave. Put on Lone Wolf. Show them some fucking Slaughterhouse Rock or a little Monster Dog. I mean, maybe I don't know, maybe you just want to fucking spin some records backwards. I'm not sure. Um, but I really did have a great time with this, Ty. Like it's it's almost like we're at the video store just chewing the fucking shooting the shit. And I really thank you for hanging out with us for a little while.
Oh yeah.
It's the sun is down, so you can go out there and stalk the streets of Asheville and fight bears and kill hippies.
Yeah. Actually, I'm gonna go play heavy metal horror music now.
Hell yeah. But don't forget to play your records backwards, and point the speakers at the street so all the children can become possessed and murder their parents.
Well, there's one metal record, and I cannot remember which one it is that makes fun of that, and it says it's worse forwards than backwards.
Oh shit.
And then you can end the night with Rob Zombie's Halloween.
2.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening to this episode. Feel free to search us out on the interwebs. There's a Facebook page, there's an Instagram page, there's a Twitter page, Saul under Filmgasm Productions. Me and Caleb are out there on the internet as well. If you want to assert yourself and say that no, Rob Zombie is the Orson Welles of our time, and I will hear nothing of it. Come at me, bro. Why not? I love talking movies, so I will tell you why your opinion sucks. But yeah, have fun. Don't eat too much candy, and make sure to always play your records backwards and yell at your mom.
And crack geodes. That's how you open the gate.